This country will never be a good place for all of us to live in unless we make it a great place for all of us to live in. That's what Theodore Roosevelt said 100 years ago, and in 100 years we've come a great distance. But victims of crime still suffer from the legacy of what happened to them. And that's an area where our community is needed to grow, and thankfully has had some agencies that have helped it to grow. So I'm privileged here to help to spread the word. This is National, let me get the correct title. This is National Crime Victims' Rights Week. This is a program started by the U.S. Department of Justice, Office for Victims' Rights, and it's intended to raise awareness for folks in the public about those services that are available right here in our community for victims of crime. I'm very pleased to have with me today from Women in Need, Lisa Doherty, here to my left. Also from the District Attorney's Office, that's Chief County Detective James Brown. And then from Over the Rainbow Children's Advocacy Center, Executive Director Diane Kelso. And I've asked each of them to say a few words in regard to the victims advocacy programs that they have. And I would like to point out that next year, this is the first year that we'll recognize this, but we'd like to plan something that would be an opportunity for those who are victims of crime to be able to understand more about these services available in Franklin County, how they can access them. We're not sure what that will be, but I think we'll start the dialogue after today and determine what would be a good forum and format for that going forward. So we'll start with Lisa Doherty from Women in Need.
Thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate the opportunity to get together today. As Paul said, my name is Lisa Doherty, and I'm the Director of Community Services at Women in Need, and we're located here in Franklin County, but it's really important to know that we serve all victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, and also victims of violent crime in Franklin and Fulton counties. And one of the things, we've been in the community 30 plus years, and one of the most important things I think is that we continue to strive every day to work to serve the individuals that are reaching out that are victims of violence. And Crime Victims' Rights Week is a really important week to recognize individuals and to celebrate the success stories and the survivors, and also to remember the individuals that we have lost to the hand of violence. So at Women in Need, we offer many, many different services. I think in the community, we probably continue to try really hard to create the awareness, and we're going to probably be doing that for the rest of our lives because it's really interesting. I think most people in the community would say, I'm very aware that you have an emergency shelter, but what else do you do? So there are a lot of other things that we do. And some of the things that we do are we provide medical advocacy in all the local hospitals, Chambersburg, Waynesboro, and Fulton County Medical Center. We also provide legal advocacy in the courthouse and also at our local police departments. That is really important. Oftentimes the support and advocacy that we can provide for those victims at that moment of crisis is a determining factor into whether or not they move forward and they're able to move through that crisis and begin their life of healing and recovery. So that's very important. We also have a 24-hour hotline, and that's very important for individuals that feel the need that they would be able to call us. No matter what time or day, we would be able to be there. One of the advantages to having the 24-hour hotline is that we are able to then assist in coordinating with other agencies in our community. We're also able to access police departments, hospitals, and those type of agencies that will be able to help them. So the hotline is very, very important. We have a prevention education program that is essential because in prevention education, we are working on the piece that's probably, hopefully one day, going to be able to make a huge impact on the fact that we'll be able to raise awareness and lessen the impact of violence in our community. That's really the goal, and I think it's the goal of everyone here at this panel, and I think that that is a wonderful goal to have. And I'm hoping one day that hopefully maybe we'll all be put out of a job because we will have actually achieved our goal. So I'm excited for that day to come. So, and one of the other things that we also have is individual and group counseling. The idea of counseling is very important as individuals move on in their lives. It really is important as they move through the crisis and they begin to look at the point where they want to start the healing process, that counseling becomes very important. And in that, Women in Need works on the empowerment model, and that means that we are simply guiding and assisting individuals to know what their options are. and we're also supporting them. It's really important to not control or tell individuals what to do when they have experienced violence, because it will throw them or trigger them right back into the life of violence and domestic violence or whatever type of violence that they were experiencing. So that's essential when you are working from our standpoint of empowerment, which is part of Crime Victim Rights Week, the title that they chose this year. So that's really, really important. And we do have our emergency shelter, which is something that seems to be the biggest thing that people recognize in the community here, is that we have an emergency shelter. So we do have a 16-bed emergency shelter, and we're in the process of breaking ground and building a brand new shelter. So that will look a little different in the future. But for right now, we do have our emergency shelter, and we are able to serve victims of domestic violence. And also, one of the other questions that comes to light often is, when we say we serve victims of violence, what exactly does that mean? And what that means is we serve men, women, and children who have been victims of violence. So that oftentimes comes into question. So we are able to serve all of them. And sometimes it's in different ways, but each situation is unique, and we do that. One of the biggest things that probably has happened over the past maybe 6 to 9 months now is obviously Over the Rainbow has opened, and that has been a very needed thing in our community. I am the director of 2 sexual assault response teams in Franklin, Fulton, and Bedford counties. So we started our original one in 2004 and then our second one in 2010. When we began those, we work with victims that have been sexually assaulted ages 13 and over. So that obviously leads out any pediatric cases. So the Children's Advocacy Center now here in Chambersburg is allowing us to not have to refer those individuals out of county to receive services. It has also created a collaboration and allowed us to work together and provide those services in one space at the initial point of crisis, and then be able to offer ongoing services at our office. And that's one of the main things that we're really trying to do with our new shelter and advocacy center that we're building, is create the ability to have all the services in one location. It not only creates a safer environment, it also maintains confidentiality, and it really helps those individuals feel supported and feel more comfortable as they deal with a very difficult time. So that's a little bit about Women in Need. We work with many agencies, all the hospitals, the police departments, and many, many people in the community. So I think it's important as we talk about all the different people that are here at the table today, that we not forget all the other agencies and all the other people that are doing really hard work in the community. And I really hope to continue to grow our relationship with the Children's Advocacy Center as it grows, and I'm hoping that we will have more opportunities to build on what we have with them and other agencies. And also to keep in mind that victims of violence do deserve our support. And I know myself and everyone here in front of us are committed to making that happen. So thank you, Paul, for inviting me today.
Lisa, could you give the hotline number?
Sure, absolutely. The hotline number is 717-264-4444. We also have a 1-800 number. That number is 1-800-621-6660, and is a toll-free number that works in the state of Pennsylvania. So thank you so much.
Then Jim Brown from the District Attorney's Office.
Thank you, Paul. I'm Jim Brown, the Chief County Detective for District Attorney Matt Fogel. Franklin County in general, and the Franklin County District Attorney Matt Fogel in particular, have shown and continue to show their high regard for the members of our community who fall victim to the unlawful acts of criminals. District Attorney Fogel is a victim-centric prosecutor who personally meets with victims and sincerely cares about them. He thoroughly explains the justice process to them, and he advocates vigorously on their behalf in local, state, and federal court. District Attorney Fogel was a driving force in the creation of the Over the Rainbow Children's Advocacy Center, and he is also the president of their board of directors. Mr. Fogel has also instituted several protocols for law enforcement to ensure efficient investigation into serious crimes such as sexual assault, domestic violence, child abuse, and elder abuse. The District Attorney's Office also supports Women in Need, a long-standing victim support group here in Franklin County. The DA's office also has 2 victim advocates as employees here, and they're contracted from WIN, and they support the victims throughout the judicial process. Under District Attorney Fogel's leadership, the Assistant District Attorneys serve in the county's Elder Abuse Task Force and STOP Grant Program, as well as work hand-in-hand with the Children's Advocacy Center and the Franklin County Drug Task Force. The Franklin County Commissioners, at Matt Fogel's urging, recently approved a new detective position that's entitled the Special Crimes Detective. The primary duties of that detective are to assist all the Franklin County law enforcement agencies in investigations such as child abuse, elder abuse, and sexual abuse cases. That position was filled on April 13th of this year by Detective Scott Mummert, who recently retired from the Chambersburg Police Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And finally, Diane from Over the Rainbow.
Well, I echo both Lisa and Jim. Thank you so much for calling together this group. It's important that we remember within our system that there are people who suffer emotionally, physically, in many, many ways when they are victims of crime. I'm a lifelong resident of Franklin County, and having worked as a police officer for 28 years in this county, I know firsthand and have been side by side with many people who have gone through the criminal justice system as a victim. I am proud to say, as a lifelong resident and as a police officer in this county, that Franklin County cares about its victims. From the district attorney's office to Women in Need, who have been an agency that I've been familiar with during my entire career, quite frankly, could not have done as good of a job for the victims while prosecuting their case and investigating their case had it not been for that agency there to stand beside those folks and to provide them with resources that I was unable to provide them with. So I'm very proud to be sitting at this table today with all of you folks, and also very proud that this is a county that cares about its citizens. I know part of the theme is enhancing communities and empowerment, and that's been going on here for a very, very long time. We just happen to recognize it as part of our mantra this year, I guess. But in terms of the Children's Advocacy Center, very briefly and quickly, I can tell you that a discussion has gone on in this county for, I'll say 20 years and possibly even longer, about the need for a Children's Advocacy Center specifically to deal with the unique and special needs that children as victims have. Going through our criminal justice system as an adult victim is incredibly difficult and tiring. And you can imagine what that's like for a child, because the system doesn't change because it's a child. We simply have to put a child through that adult system. The Advocacy Center, our goal is to provide a safe and child-friendly place for children and their families to receive services that help restore and lessen the trauma of the system that they must go through once that child has been victimized. And it's really recognized as a national standard. We didn't create this concept. Children's advocacy centers are being utilized across the nation and are recognized as a best practice as it relates to children. And there's a lot of very evidence-based research. There's all kinds of things like that, but if I could just tell you in my experience what I believe the difference is. As a police officer working in this county, I handled child sex assault and child abuse cases. And without the resource of a Children's Advocacy Center, I was the person who perhaps would hold the hand of a 6-year-old child, victim of abuse, sexual and or physical, And I had to interview them because they had words that meant something and it was important for the investigation. However, the resource that I had to interview this child was in the basement of the Chambersburg Police Department. You can only imagine what that added to the burden that this child was already carrying. And I was the good guy. So in my experience, the Children's Advocacy Center is about a place where children can be interviewed. It's a much more child-friendly environment. There is a professional forensic interviewer who does the interview of this child while the professionals come to them. In the past, not only did I have to interview the child, but they might have to go to anywhere from 4 to 6 additional locations and tell their story 4 to 6 additional times for all of those professionals to do their job. What we have now in Franklin County by having the Children's Advocacy Center is all of those professionals come to the child. So on any given day now in Franklin County, when there is a report of suspected abuse of a child, that child is scheduled to come to the Advocacy Center. And on that particular day, there is a police officer, a children and youth worker, a district attorney, a member of WIN staff providing family advocacy. These professionals all come together on one day for that child. So you can imagine the lessening of the impact on the child and their family. The added benefit is these professionals now are all on day one being assembled as a team for that child. They all worked together in the past. All of these players always worked together. I worked with those other entities before. But the difference was we were all kind of doing our part of the job and then collaborating as we went. Whereas now we come together, or they come together as a multidisciplinary team on day one. They hear this child's story on closed circuit TV as it's being told all together. They can start to brainstorm and do the things that intelligent groups of people, when they come together around one table and are all able to offer their thoughts, things go much better. So ultimately the end result for both the child, if in fact there is a prosecution or a criminal prosecution in this case, things just work better when people work together. So that's a little bit about the Children's Advocacy Center. Once again, I would like to thank you for bringing this group together. The community needs to know, number one, that problems exist. Because once they know that problems exist and people begin talking about them, that's the only time that you begin to look for solutions. And so we all want to solve these problems. And as Lisa said so well, I hope someday I sit before you and say, we're locking the doors of the Advocacy Center because we no longer need one. That's all of our goals. But until that time, we are going to be here and we're going to provide the services that these young people need to heal and to grow and to know that their community cared about them during the worst time of their life.
Great, thank you, Diane. I know you folks in the media have deadlines, but if you would, you all would indulge, maybe you would have a few questions for especially these three.
Still trying to finish.
Can you pass me a microphone, please? Sorry.
We don't get to take that?
The battery died.
Diane,
Actually-
do you know of an estimate about how many cases the CAC has handled so far?
Yes, as of today, actually, we processed the 80th individual case of services for a child and their family in Franklin County. And that would date back to November 1st is when of 2014, we began providing services. And as of today, we processed our 80th child and family through the center.
And how many clients is WIN assisting now, or how many are using the emergency shelter?
Sure. Are you looking for on a yearly basis or
Yeah.
at any one time?
Last year, and how many are currently using it?
Okay, sure. As of right now, our capacity probably right now is at 14 out of the 16 beds. So, and we have stayed pretty full over the past year. I don't have the exact number of individuals that would have been in shelter because it would be split up into adults and children. So I don't have that. But on average, in a year, as far as working with clients, and that would be men, women, and children, we're somewhere probably between 1,500 and 1,600 individuals. So, and that'll vary a little bit from year to year, but that's an accurate account of individuals that would be receiving any of our services, and oftentimes many of our services. So.
Any other questions?
I'm curious to know the instance of men using the shelter.
Yeah, as a national average, I think the national average is right around 5%, and I would say that we are probably somewhere between 3 and 5%. I think the interesting thing is that there really are men that are victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, and especially the collaboration with Diane, I think she would back me up on this, that there are a fair amount of young men and male children that are victims of sexual assault and possibly, obviously, child abuse also. So I think that the prevalence of it is there. It's just that there's a stigma in our community and in society in general that men aren't victims, especially of domestic violence. It's just not physically possible that any female or same-sex relationship could overtake a male. And that's absolutely not true, because we have served men in all relationships, and that is absolutely not true. And I think that's one of the big stigmas that we would want people to understand, is that we have protocols in place to assist men in maybe a slightly different way, but providing the same exact services. And that's something that we don't talk about a lot. And I think it's very, very important that, as Diane said, conversations need to be started. And I've been with WIN for 21 years, and I have personally, on 2 occasions that I can recall at this moment, I have provided a safe place for that individual in the community so that they were safe from their partner. And I have also responded recently to a medical advocacy call at Chambersburg Hospital. It was a male that had been physically assaulted, had bruises to show for it. And just to help everyone understand how we work together, we worked with the hospital and a local hotel to make sure that that individual had a place to stay overnight. And then we provided that individual with gas cards and food to make sure that he was able to return to his home state after moving here. So I think that it's really important that we do work together and that we do have resources in order to make that happen. So those services go far beyond just the safe housing that so many people talk of.
I think that one of the things that we're also finding, and that we're going to learn, that we already know, but that we're going to be better prepared to deal with, is no one's surprised when you talk about cycles of violence or cycles of sex abuse. I mean, most, even people that aren't in the business that we are, recognize that that exists. But by having the Children's Advocacy Center, and again, having a specific focus for children, what I see happening, what we will be working towards happening, is having perhaps a better potential to break that cycle, because there is intervention specifically for children who are going through this, not just from the criminal justice perspective, that's part and parcel, but this intervention of mental health, therapy, counseling. If little people are exposed to domestic violence in their home, what little people learn is that that's an appropriate way to act. Little people grow into adults, and if that's the only exposure that they've had, that's what they believe to be correct, even, or perhaps maybe not believed to be correct, but the only thing that they know, and therefore that's how they act. So, again, this collaboration and people working together, and there perhaps might be pieces specifically focused where the Over the Rainbows Children's Advocacy Center is very focused on a particular group of victims. It still has impact in the bigger picture in terms of our society and in terms of changes coming about. So, that's really exciting for all of us to be able to make a difference in that way.
Any other questions? Jim, go ahead and microphone. I'll just wrap up. So both Lisa and Diane made reference to this year's motto, which is engaging the community and empowering victims. So this is a step, it's a modest step in engaging the community so the community understand, as Diane said, understand first that there really is crime in our community. And when there is crime, there are victims from that. And then empowering victims. Victims, when they have been subject to a criminal act, are stripped of their dignity. So by this empowerment that these agencies provide, it helps to restore that victim, to make them whole, restore their dignity, which is a very noble thing to do. So let's hope that next year this can be not just an event like this where we talk about it, but where we put this talk into action. I know that our office will be certainly work to help for that, and many others within the community as well. So I thank all of you, Lisa and Jim and Diane. Thank Matt Fogel, the district attorney, wasn't able to be here today. He's on guard duty, I believe. And thank you all for coming to hear more about this important awareness week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.